I think the previous panel mentioned ROI, and Guy had several great case studies in terms of Twitter and how companies are using Twitter to drive business. But today, I wanted to focus our panel around the topic of ROI. And everyone talks about it, but it's still relatively hard to measure. I mean, we're quickly getting into kind of a mature state of using social media. We did talk a lot about Twitter, we mentioned Facebook, but the purpose of this panel is really to kind of take a step back and also talk about other channels, other things that are social, that are taking place in digital, that doesn't necessarily take place on Twitter, doesn't necessarily take place on Facebook. And there's a couple of themes to ROI. Over the course of my consulting, I've seen people try to define ROI, but I think that we're going to two extremes. On the one side, we have companies like CPG brands just counting likes or counting fans on their Facebook page. On the other side, we have companies like Blendtec who can track sales all the way through to the actual sale. So their online videos are driving actual sales. So I think, part of what we're going to talk about today is that it's neither of those two extremes, right? Those are probably metrics that do matter, that you have to look at, but it's not that simple, right? So today, we have a great group of panelists. We're going to have some non-obvious examples, several pharma cases, and other cases where we're talking about social actions. So not just people, liking your page or talking about it, but how do people actually help each other get towards the purchase? So Tom Kwon's going to talk about a social platform that's going to help do that. And really the ultimate question that hopefully we'll leave you with is how do we actually reproducibly drive business success? And how do we tie that to social success? So some of the examples we heard earlier this morning is that, some tweets have gone viral, videos have gone viral, but what we haven't said after that is how does that actually tie to whether, it actually drove business sales. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to have our panelists quickly introduce themselves, say, industry, the name of the company, and things like that. And then we'll get into a few example case studies where some of them are very non-traditional ways of measuring ROI. And as you'll probably see as we go through their case examples, there are different things that we're measuring, and more importantly, it's a different mix of things that we're measuring, and each is going to be different depending on the industry or the type of product that you're marketing. So let me start with Ben. We'll go down the line for some quick introductions first.
Hi, my name is Ben Arnon. I'm the head of Global Brand Partnerships for Wildfire. We're a division of Google. We were acquired last August by Google. We're a social media marketing platform. We essentially help enable brands and agencies to build, deploy, and measure social content experiences across social channels and really manage their social presence.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Tom Kwon. I'm the CEO of DotBox. We have three offerings. We have an e-commerce enterprise platform suite, delivering transactions for luxury brands and jewelry and sports retail. We also have a social commerce application that empowers users to interact with one another during the path to purchase. I'll be happy to talk about that. And then finally, managed services to identify the primary revenue channels, and then we focus on increasing performance there.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Trish Nettleship. I'm with UCB, and you've probably never heard of them. We're a global biopharma brand based out of Belgium. We focus on severe diseases, so epilepsy, Crohn's. Those are some of our focus areas. I came to pharma about 8 months ago from AT&T, and that, if you know anything about the pharma industry, it's a big deal to bring in someone just to lead social efforts. So my role at UCB is to lead our social media efforts across the globe. So it's unique to the industry. There's not a lot of folks who are focused in that area, so we're excited about what we're able to do here at UCB.
Good morning. My name is Tom Panchak. I'm with Johnson & Johnson. I'm a senior director over digital marketing for our diabetes solutions companies. That's a couple of businesses of ours at J&J. Firmly in the medical device sector, a hybrid business. So I have to work with, or I should say I have the pleasure of working with the consumer side, or the patient side as we call it, as well as the professional side, for all of the elements of paid, owned, and earned media there in that group of companies.
I'm Rob Petersen, and I'm the president of a digital marketing agency up in Connecticut called BarnRaisers. And a reason why I'm here is that I started just actually studying the subject of social media ROI, and through our company blog, putting it out as case studies. And about a year ago, I added up the blog posts and realized that there were 166 case studies. So I put it out as an ebook, available on our website, can be downloaded for free, and it's been downloaded about 50,000 times in less than 9 months. So I've had the advantage point of being able to look at it from a number of different companies and to see that it is a topic that's of interest to everybody.
And it's very different for different industries, different companies, different kinds of
Absolutely.
products. So let's kick off with Ben. Ben will talk about Rock Resorts and talk about some of the things that they ended up measuring to determine success of that particular campaign.
Yeah, and just to start off, I'd say, to add a little context, I think in general, ROI, a few things. Number one, I think that it's very dependent upon, as you mentioned, it's very dependent upon the particular brand, the particular industry, and what metrics are important for the brand going into thinking about ROI to actually measure, and that can really differ from brand to brand and case by case. Overall, I think that social media marketing is really is most focused on building long-term relationships with consumers, and that's not always so easy to quantify. And so I'll just preface by saying that, in general terms, I like to think of ROI as, what is the return on the investment that we're making in our social media marketing efforts, and the real return comes through earned media, through sort of activating in our audience on behalf of the brand to generate content, to share and amplify our content, and that's sort of creating that army of content sharers and content producers is where we can really generate a lot of ROI as a brand, and you do that through obviously putting out into the market as compelling, engaging content as possible. It's not always easy to really measure direct revenue ROI, particularly say if you're a CPG that's selling an offline product. But this example of Rock Resorts is one in which they entered into their initiatives with clear objectives, and they were able to actually quantify in tangible ways some key metrics for them. So Rock Resorts is owned by Vail Resorts. I think they have 6 different resorts, mainly located in Colorado. One is actually in Jamaica, really focused on providing exciting adventure, travel experiences, skiing, golf, scuba, snorkeling, those kinds of experiences. And so they wanted to do 2 things. They were focused actually on increasing their fan base, because they realized that with an increased fan base, they could engage further, they could sort of build that army further. So they were focused on increasing their audience size. And they also were focused on increasing online revenue, both bookings and revenue. And so they set out to run a series of different initiatives on social media channels, mainly on Facebook, ran a bunch of continuous sweepstakes, so kind of traditional promotional campaigns, and not only generated fans, but also leads, email addresses as well. And then obviously a robust posting strategy over time as well to continue to sustain engagement. And at the end of the day, the metrics that they were focused on, they really did see some clear results. They had over 40x increase in the number of their Facebook fans. Year on year, both online bookings and revenues, they increased by over 100%. So again, this is one particular brand that was focused on some quantifiable metrics, and they did see some real results there. Other times, other brands that we work with are perhaps focused on results that are maybe a little more difficult to quantify, and that's where ROI does become pretty tricky sometimes.
So that's a great example of where, there were clear metrics to measure, like the size of the audience and online bookings. So those were directly measurable. But we also talk about the concept of earned media, and we touched upon this in the previous panel as well. A lot of companies, and I'll use the Oreo example from Super Bowl, they talk about how many times their tweet was retweeted. So the question is, yes, that tweet was retweeted many, many times, but I don't know if you guys have seen a follow-on case study about the sales. I mean, probably for Oreos, it's hard to actually distinguish the sales because they got so much sales going on already, and hard to attribute lift in sales to one particular thing that they're doing in marketing. But kind of keep that in the back of your mind. Earned media is one metric that we have to pay attention to. But again, we have to really, for business purposes, be able to tie that to ROI. So I want to have Rob go next and talk about, Tortilla Land, which is a great online to offline case example of ROI.
Sure. This is a good segue coming from Ben, because Wildfire was actually instrumental to the sales success here. The product I'm going to talk about is a fresh tortilla made by a company out in San Diego called Circle Foods. And it's called Tortilla Land, and it competes in the sort of commodity category of tortillas. And you might say, what does social media do for a product that you buy in the supermarket? And in this case, it's a lot. It's kind of a David and Goliath struggle between a small brand and Mission, which is the category leader. And when we got into social media, we determined that it's a fresh tortilla, so you have to buy it in the refrigerated section of a Costco or a Walmart where it's in distribution, and you cook it up in a pan in less time than it takes to make toast. And if you've ever been to a Mexican restaurant and had somebody make a fresh tortilla at the tortilla wheel, it tastes just like that. So it has low awareness, but a high level of word-of-mouth value among those who've tried it. And that's really how we use social media to start to build the business. We first sort of started to look just where the activity was, and we found we had a huge resource in cooking bloggers who were actually writing recipes about it, taking pictures of the product on their phone. And if you've ever stopped to look at the traffic generated by cooking bloggers, you can see that it's huge, because they're writing every day to an audience that comes to them quite a bit. But we needed to see how we could use it to build sales. So Ben's company, Wildfire, does a lot in the area of social promotions, particularly on Facebook. And so we started to run some sweepstakes and give away some coupons. And if any of you have entered any of these sweepstakes, you know that you have to leave an email address in the entry form. And so what we were able to do was, and the question would be, how did likes translate to sales? We took a Facebook page that started at about 1,000 people, and today, running Wildfire promotions every couple of months, it's at about 17,000. And with that, we've had about 20,000 people enter sweepstakes and coupons, and as a result, we've built an email database of over 20,000 people, which we've been able to separate by state. And then we've been able to, since this is a brand that requires word of mouth, take those people who've entered and send them little things about what's going in a store, because it's a brand that needs to drive distribution as well as sales. And the long and short of it is that we've been able to, again, take likes that have grown very, very by many, many time factors. We've been able to build an email list from nothing to over 20,000. And a year later, we've been able to increase sales with no other form of media except social by 35%. So it's a case study of where a brand, where social, and particularly a brand that had some word-of-mouth value, could be put to use and drive hard numbers.
And that's a great example of the David and Goliath, right? So a small brand that cannot outspend a big brand in the same category, they can now outsmart them using social. And the other key theme that I took away from that is sustainable. So instead of traditional marketing campaigns, which are basically over after you turn off the media dollars, now this is still paying dividends a year after. And you can, because at the time they didn't have any other marketing campaigns in market, they could directly attribute the lift in sales in offline to the social campaign. So that's a great example. And I think one of the other things is really leveraging the community to be part of, the people that carry your message forward. So there's more and more research that now show that people trust their peers more and they trust ads less. So how can we take advantage of or stimulate more of these social actions? So I'm going to have Tom talk about his platform and some of the characteristics of how, for the Laura Geller example, how you're able to leverage the community and other people in the shopping path.
Great, thank you. Is Jessica here? Jessica Farrell? Hey! All right, she's my client, so she's kind of babysitting me. All right, I've been in the internet space for about 18 years. It's like grandfather years for people in this space. And this whole ROI thing, I don't know if people really understand the difference between metrics and ROI. Everyone slams all these numbers. It's like data nerds everywhere about social. And everywhere you walk into is like these conversation platforms, listening devices, managing hundreds of communities. We're one of 52 companies in the MDC Partners Network, and we're the only tech-centric one. And we have some really impressive social media companies, and they have so much data. It's amazing. But to me, ROI, and I've been behind the scenes on the board levels, basically, if you want to build an ROI model, you have to have access to immense data behind the DMZ in the client organization. Basically, their operational costs down to their profit margins. It's not as easy as developing an ROI model, especially as it relates to social, I would say. So having said that, we've developed a product called Blue Carrot that's been in development for 2 years, in focus groups for 8 months, now deployed at laurageller.com, laurageller.com/beautybar. And what it does is, our whole premise is that we want to engage the user while they're in the critical path to purchase or in the process of browsing for a purchase on the native site. So what does that mean? We let them opt in, and the first thing we ask them is, what are you looking for? And based on that ask, we activate that user's community of friends and family to address that. It may not be someone they know, but it's somebody that's like them, like-minded shopper. And what we're doing from that experience is, through an asynchronous pattern, we're fostering the real-time exchange of product reviews, product recommendations, and then ideally inspirations on new purchase ideas. That's the premise of what we're trying to do. And on the backside, brands have the ability to kind of curate these conversations based on browsing history and incisively go in for the sale. And I mean go in for the sale. It's either that or mitigate problems. For us, we think that social commerce is about engaging the user while they're shopping. If you're on Facebook, you're not thinking about, I play guitar. When I'm on Facebook, I'm not thinking about, wow, that Gibson guitar. And if anything, I get retargeted ads after looking at some stomp boxes and guitars, but I'm not in the mind frame of buying. We think that enabling social at your native site, you have a better chance at creating that conversion. We've been fortunate also to work with a brand like Laura Geller. I have no idea about makeup, but we sell a lot of it on our platform. I'm not going to disclose metrics because she's watching me there, probably recording it for the CEO. But it's in the up teens, and we've had huge successes around it. And part of it is because the brand is desired. I've had clients in the past where, and I'm gonna bring it to a base foundation for what I'm going to talk about. I've had clients in the past where we're doing SEO. So I've spent 4 years in SEO developing automation software there too. And this client was selling organic swimwear, right? And we engaged with them in February. A month later, they're like, what the hell's going on? There's no traffic. I'm like, it's organic swimwear. It's February. No one's buying this stuff right now. So I think it's really important to put context on desirable products as well.
So I mean, some of the things that you told me about the platform before is that, in offline situations, shopping is very much a social experience, right? Women go with their friends so that they can tell them they look good in these shoes and things like that. But online, it's kind of like you sitting in front of a computer. So it's completely lacking that social element. So I think, you said the word at the very end, context. I think, people need context to be able to get to their purchase decision quicker or more efficiently, right?
Yeah, I think people are missing the boat. Social media and commerce in our world is not about driving traffic from Facebook to increase your average order value or conversion rates. The research has told you that it's like a tiny slither in terms of overall revenues. But we know that people trust friends and family and like-minded shoppers. And two things that we hone in on regarding that is that, one, it definitely creates inspiration or new ideas on things you didn't even know you wanted to buy, and all of a sudden you're buying it. That's huge. The second piece is to be able to fortify your purchase decision. That whole conversion game, it's a very difficult thing, but with these, it helps out a lot.
Great. So with that, let me turn it over to Tom to talk about their use of Facebook. Now, this is a little bit switching gears because we're now getting into the pharma space. But LifeScan is kind of at the intersection between consumer device or consumer product and medical device. So there's some interesting caveats there. So let me turn it over to Tom.
Right on. So for the last 7.5 years, between the AccuView brand at Johnson & Johnson and the LifeScan division with One Touch products, these are hybrid businesses, and yet they're in highly regulated categories where we have to deal with, an FDA, healthcare compliance. We still have to deal with all the trademark and legal and copy review, all of the elements. So to be able to set up even participation in social media takes a lot of upfront legwork. And several years ago, on that first team that was creating the guidelines for social engagement, for social interaction at Johnson & Johnson with our corporate CMO, and working on the elements that would enable us to prepare beforehand for a real-time type of engagement, including the use of our internal resources as opposed to going outside for even moderation. So, and creating the risk mitigation guidelines, the work instructions, all of the elements, in fact, looking at what are the likely comments that we're going to have to engage quickly in our space, including, any adverse events reporting. So the work that we were able to do beforehand to create a large document of immediate responses was some of the front-end work that went together with the social calendar that needed to be developed against, creating engagement. So the objective, really how we looked at social media over the years, and it continues to evolve, but it's as we look at any of the other forms of media, we're looking at the consumer journey or the patient journey. We're looking at what is the objective of each of the areas within that, paid, owned, and earned media. We're looking at the KPIs that would be associated. So when we talk about return on investment, the KPIs associated with the elements of our owned or shared media, owned being our websites, our mobile platform, our strategic marketing database, our leased or shared space, which would be our Facebook platform, YouTube. Those each have specific KPIs, and then when we talk about return on investment, what is the, for us, it's ultimately in integration, what is happening at a dashboard level that I can share up the chain of command. So it began at the CMO level. We look at our business from a KPI level, and then it goes back up to the CMO level at a dashboard that gets to a couple different things based on what's important to our business within the consumer journey. So for us, in social, I need it to do a couple things. I need it to be able to accelerate or amplify all of my media. So if we have paid media, it's going to work from a perspective of, awareness, consideration, or exposure. And as I try to move people into the mid-funnel where social works together with the rest of my owned platform, those elements are driving toward brand preference and conversion. And so that's what we're measuring them for. Now, at the end of the day, what the CMO wants to see is what's happening to a couple of different areas. What's happening to our purchase intent, and that would be more upper funnel brand, notice and consideration, and what is happening to our cost per either acquisition or our cost per RX, and in integration. So we're taking a whole consumer journey and we're moving it into one metric of, cost per RX or cost per action, actually getting hand raisers to come into our database. And so Facebook and the rest of our social platform sits right there in the middle, but it also is amplifying the different elements of media, and all within the context of us being prepared, so that we know that as we're able to engage extremely quickly. We have a social action team internally, and if anything falls outside of that long list of comments or responses, we'll immediately be able to respond to take it to another real-time medium, which is customer service, which has been in existence for years, right? And at the same time, we have a team that includes all of legal, not all, a small team that includes a component of legal, regulatory, healthcare compliance, and the brand and the agency partner that is leading with us. And we have a quick turnaround time for anything that falls outside of those things that we've prepared in advance. So that's really how we look at it.
So that's great. So let me echo two of the key themes. One is preparedness. And just like in the Oreo case where they were ready to retweet right when the opportunity presented itself, especially in pharma, it's really about preparedness, so that, if you're prepared for all the different kinds of questions or comments that might come in, then you're able to respond in the kind of time frame that is required in social, right? And the other key theme that I took away from that is the integration. So social can play a role in every stage of the funnel, and actually should play a role in every stage of the funnel, not just awareness. So like I mentioned at the very beginning, we often take a relatively simplistic view of ROI. On the one side, CPG companies are just counting likes and fans. On the other side, some people are taking it all the way through to the sale. But it's really not either of those extremes. It's somewhere in between. And better yet is really the integration of all of that, so that it's able to amplify the traditional media that you have going on, and also to provide more sustainability in between your campaigns. Because paid campaigns typically can drive a lot of spike in interest, but it goes back down to nothing when you turn the media dollars off. And social provides that kind of connectivity that connects the different individual campaigns. So that's great. So now we'll move on to the very last example. Trish will talk about the community that UCB has created. And really, my two questions for you are, how did you get that pushed through in the first place? And then the second is, how do you approach ROI in an environment where you're not tracking all the way through to the sale?
So thanks. I'll give you a little bit of background. About 2 years ago, pharma decided they needed to get into the social space in a big way. So there may have been some folks already involved, but everybody got on Facebook. So there was a lot of, we call them disease state, but unbranded communities on Facebook. So we don't have our brands out there. There's no commenting enabled, right? There was no conversation happening. It was basically a static site, right? That's where everybody started. So about a year and a half ago, Facebook said, guess what, pharma? You now cannot have commenting enabled. You've got to enable commenting across all of your disease state platforms. Well, risk averse, as Tom already talked about, we're highly risk averse. We're talking risk, we're talking multi-million-dollar fines, right? We're not talking just we make a mistake, oops, sorry, PR disaster. It's much bigger than that for us. So pharma ran, just in droves, everybody got off Facebook. At the same time, we had just really gotten in, and this is before I came on board. We made a decision, the opposite of everybody else. Guess what? We're going to go in. We were actually the first pharma company to enable commenting proactively on our disease state platforms. It was a pretty big deal at the time. It quite honestly still is. It's a challenge for us because we have to have so many layers of filtering. You can imagine, I came from AT&T and I came over here, came to find out we can't talk about our products? What? How do you have a conversation when you can't talk about your products, right? How do you really driving towards the sale if you can't talk about your products? That's a big challenge, right? So we really had to step back and say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish? So I came on board last summer, and we were very focused on the likes, the fans, right? It was all about the followers. We were advertising, we were growing our likes on Facebook for our communities, doing a really good job of increasing reach, but what did that all mean? So the first thing I did is step back and said, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish? What's our goal here? So we had to sit down with the brand teams. We talked about what are your objective as a brand? What are you trying to accomplish? So in the epilepsy space, one of our brands is very focused on partial onset seizures. So you're probably familiar with a generalized seizure. Well, partial onset seizure manifests itself in a variety of ways. The individual may not even know they're having a seizure. So it's a challenge, right, to understand that you're having that, go and talk to your healthcare provider about that. So we're engaging the broader community from a healthcare provider perspective, from the patient, from caregivers, to really start to look for those symptoms and build awareness around partial onset seizures so people can go and receive treatment. That is a top objective for that brand team. Why don't we leverage this community to help us drive awareness for partial onset seizures? So we really spent time listening to our community and having that dialogue, understanding what their thoughts were around partial onset seizures. And we were actually able to drive content and drive the conversation towards that we were building awareness for partial onset seizures significantly. We drove it in double digits in a very short period of time. Luckily for us, we're known as the epilepsy company, so if you're going to go and drive awareness around something, you better make sure you're pretty strong in that space, or else your partners, your competitors will be getting that business. So we were a very strong player in the epilepsy space, so we were able to build that awareness, drive the dialogue with the patient and the healthcare provider. In the end, hopefully, we're getting more prescriptions written, but the focus was really around getting more people treated for partial onset seizures, and we were able to measure that from increased conversations with healthcare providers, increased conversations on platforms across the web to see that dialogue increase. So that was one thing. The next thing was really, we had these great platforms out there. We weren't really sure what we should do with them. So in the epilepsy community, again, we said, we've got to drive engagement, meaningful conversation with these folks, because it's about having encouragement platforms. So if I've got epilepsy, I want a place to go to learn from others that have epilepsy, or learn about new facts that are coming out. So it's fascinating, some of the stats in the epilepsy space that patients aren't even aware of. So we started really focusing our content based on the areas of where our patients were concerned about. And if you're familiar with Facebook stats, the average engagement rate for any brand page out there is about 0.5%, right? Pretty low. We, based off of really tweaking our content focus and asking our community what they were interested in, we have no less than 3% engagement on any of our platforms in any given week. And that's the low end. We're typically anywhere from 7 to 11%. And you say, how do we measure that? Well, we're really just looking at the Facebook insights around how many folks do we have as members in our community and how many are actively engaging, whether that means, and it's some of those commenting and sharing and, right, are they engaging with the content? So we went from that average about 1%, so not bad to begin with, to no less than 3% in just 3 months' time. And how we did that is we went into our executives, we went into our board and said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to bring this in-house because, to Tom's point, we want to own those relationships with our patients. We brought that in-house. Previously, our agencies were doing that. So we own that community, that relationship with our patients and our healthcare providers. We're starting that conversation ourselves. We built a risk mitigation plan. So if this happens, here's what we're going to do. We got everybody really comfortable about that process, that preparedness. And then we said, but you've got to give us a little leeway. We need to respond in real time. People still to the most part, don't do that in pharma, right? We have to go through the review committees, the regulatory, the legal, the compliance committees before we can even respond. So you imagine you're on a social platform. Last night I was pretty upset with Delta. I tweeted, I got a response in 15 minutes. Well, that was great. Well, in our world, if you get a response within a week, that's pretty darn good. But unacceptable, because that is not the expectation of our audience. So we said, we're going to do these things, but you've got to allow us an opportunity. You've got to allow us, you got to trust us. So we built some guidelines, right? Here's general principles. But we are now responding in real time in our communities. Clearly, we're not having conversations around our brands, but there's pretty easy things that we can respond to, just encouraging our community. And again, we've seen the engagement rates jump up once again as we're more active in the community, responding same day, sharing new content that's coming out as it happens, as opposed to a week, 2 weeks later. So just those minor changes that we've made in just 6 months has had a huge impact on our communities. And that's the conversation we're having with our executives. It's not about sales. I can't measure that. I'll be the first one to tell you right now, I can't measure that for my company right now. So I have to show how are we bringing value back into the business and really change the dialogue. And it's not just about metrics. We always go right to the metrics. It's how are we having an impact on the outcomes. What's the outcome we're hoping to get, and how is what we're doing from a social team impacting that outcome? Back to the building awareness example. So that's how we're really sharing that and improving our value as an organization back into our executives.
Great, and that's a great example of where education is one of the priorities, right? It's really providing the value to the community, to differentiate UCB from any other pharma company, especially in the epilepsy space. And it really echoes what Guy said at the very beginning, the opening keynote, where he was talking about in social, we are rewarded for being good, not for being loud. So in this case, we're providing real value to the patients, and as they're interacting with us, then when it comes to choosing which drug that they're going to take or sticking with the drug that they're already taking, that earns us the quote-unquote brownie points. So again, it's not measured necessarily in sales, but it's measured in community building. So hopefully you've seen, as we've gone through each of these case studies, many different things that we measure. So it's not just one metric that matters. It's not just likes. It's not just sales. It's somewhere in between. And it's probably a different combination of those metrics that matter to each different kind of company, kind of product that you happen to be marketing. So hopefully, what you're going to take away from this session is that ROI, there's a reason why it hasn't been very clearly defined so far, because it's probably different for every company. So it's really up to you guys to go back into your respective industries and respective companies to determine what are the right metrics to measure. Because in digital and social, we have lots of things to measure. The hard part is choosing which of those metrics matter and which combination of them matter to your company. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and open it up to questions now.
Do you have any questions from there? Okay. One question I had, and I think this hopefully is something that you deal with more in pharma than some other things, is how you're kind of combining platforms that, in addition to including things like Facebook, also include forums and all that kind of thing that sort of falls out of what most of the people in this room deal with. They're really dealing, for the most part, with major platforms. So how are you measuring ROI across some things that are sort of outliers in the social space but are very important to your category?
Be happy to. So for us, that's the level of KPI that won't necessarily make it into the dashboard being those couple of things that the CMO really wants to see and the president. And those KPIs would be really engagement-based metrics that look at how are we performing within that forum in terms of the folks who are participating. So participation being a level and being able to inform level of engagement. Mm-hmm. So that's what is the purpose of that? We always look at it in pretty much four different ways, and that is notice or the awareness generation, or is it the education side, which we would call the thinking, the action of did they perform something that we wanted them to do? Did they take a specific step beyond becoming aware? And usually that's a hand raise into a database that has to do with an offer. And then on the other side of that is advocacy, where we'd like to be able to pull out of, in a razor blade model like we have, we want to be able to retain. And so we're going to be looking also at retention rate and the opportunity then for advocacy. And so we're going to look at the consumer journey in each of those areas and decide what are the one or two things that need to be accomplished. Is it the thinking and acting, or really the education, the learning, and then that first step? That would normally be where we would look with it. And then at the end of all of it, the integration with the full media plan, what's that delivering for us in terms of a total cost per RX?
Yeah. Okay. And
We, if I could just add, we measure ROI based on the user's browsing history and then the conversations that lead to a conversion. And I want to challenge everyone in this room that if we're in the area of social media and development, to, I would say, ROI behind the DMZ at the board level when you're sitting with the private equity guys that I've been trying to convince them to do projects on. What they care about is cost efficiencies on the enterprise, on operations. So if you can tie social to customer service and create savings there, that's ROI. The other piece is if you can deliver sales using social, that's ROI. I mean, everything else is going to be.
And one other aspect that Trish mentioned already, it's the research part of it. I want to know what people are talking about or asking about so that I can now customize my content development. So that allows us to be very efficient in terms of, okay, these are the 5 things we actually need to go develop right now, as opposed to the 15 that we're kind of guessing on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Quickly, did you have one thing to say, Trish, or you?
I was just going
Just to put you on the spot.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I was just going to add that insights to me is one of the most valuable things that we deliver back into the business and probably the hardest thing to measure. So we've come up with an insights dashboard. It's not, there's not numbers in there. It's really, here's the insight we pulled out, and here's the action and the decision that was made based off of that. And our executives love this because we talk about the value we're bringing back into the business, but now we're actually showing it. And the decisions, how we're making better business decisions, we're delivering better products, we're delivering on message, driving that engagement. That's the things that our executives want to hear more about.
Okay, well, thanks. We have one question here. So stand up in your name and title, please, and then we'll
James
wrap
Lee,
up.
I work for investment firm COSA. I think someone had mentioned about measurement and conversion being very important. I was wondering, what do you guys think about the concept of multi-touch attribution? I think some of the social media firms talk about that. They said, listen, we don't drive sales directly. We do assist sales along the way if you can track the entire consumer journey. Any views on that specifically, anyone? And also second, how important is online to offline attribution? There's some company that had that tools that allow retailer to do conversion with the app. You can scan on the store using third party like DataLogic to do so. Any opinion will be helpful. Thank you.
I don't think there's technology right now that could track multi-touch conversions. To retail, to online. There's a war right now with retail to online penetration, and us in the commerce space love it because the runway is so big. There's only about 6.5% penetration in global e-commerce and roughly about 8 to 9% in the US. So we're diving into that area. But behind the DMZ, I keep talking about the board and the brand. They don't understand whether you're eating away into their retail sales or you're creating newfound sales. So to talk about multi-touch, attributions, if you have vendors coming to you like that.
And let me add one final point to that. I think attribution is a relic of old media, and basically all different forms of media are trying to take credit for who drove the sale. Yeah. But I think these days the purchase funnel and the consumer journey is too complex. It's not linear anymore. It's all over the place. And so for one consumer, it may take 6 dozen touch points to get them to a sale. For another consumer, it may take 2. So it's different for everybody. It's different for every industry. So I think the attribution models are too simplistic a way of thinking about it. And it's also a holdover from old media where this magazine or this TV show wanted to take credit for driving that sale. It's not that easy anymore.
The one thing, though, I will say about the idea of attribution, is kind of summing up what a lot of people have said, is a lot of times you'll find that the social networks don't all perform evenly. And there usually is one or two that sort of are standouts. So if, Tom and Trish talked about key performance indicators, one of the values of key performance indicators is that you don't have many metrics, you just have, an identifiable number of them. But the benefit of that is if you see something happening with one of them, that you can quickly drill down. So if you see that Facebook is a driver of your business, you can sort of see, does that lead to a better conversation with people? Or if you see something trigger where a network that was kind of quiet all of a sudden generated some activity, was there some insight, in what was happening there that can kind of guide you? So it is good that there are, the different networks all kind of contributing in a different way.
So, okay, we have to wrap up. So please give everybody a round of applause.
Thank you.
And exit stage right, I guess. So we're going to break now for some quick coffee. Well, not that quick. I guess we'll start promptly at 11:30. We're going to have another panel session on social intelligence, and then Jennifer Casper from Macy's is going to present to us about social in the retail experience. So we'll see you in a few. Thanks.